Definitely Bridgerton meets X-Men vibes so far. Yeah. Pilot episode. Hey Twisted people, it's your Twisted Woman here, Chauncey K. Robinson, and today I am doing a review and breakdown of episode 1 of the new HBO Max series, The Nevers. My overall thoughts of episode 1 thus far is that I would give it a B-. There's a lot going on here. They definitely throw pretty much, I feel like, all the characters that are ever going to be in this whole entire series at you in the first 1 hour that we get so far. And there's a lot going on with each and every character. It's not just like, oh, that character passes by and then maybe in episode 2 or 3 we'll get their story or a hint of their story later. It's no, you need to know at least something or everything about this character from the very moment that they are on our screens. And I'm not sure if that's exactly the best way of going about a first episode. And I feel like it kind of hurt the episode in terms of really just kind of settling in for the ride of a whole entire season with these characters. There's very much a sort of whimsical vibe going on here so far, the colors and things, because it kind of depends, right? Like this kind of has a steampunk vibe. There's like new technology, but also technology that probably didn't even exist during that time. So you have a little bit of a suspension of disbelief with some of the things, of course, because this is a show about people who have supernatural powers. But it is very overt to the point where, you know, you have some shows that when they show Victorian England, or Victorian London, it can be very drab and the colors are always dark and it always seems like it's about to rain in London. And this show takes a little bit of an approach of, yes, the clouds look like it's going to rain constantly, but the colors and the set design has a certain vibrance to it. Joss Whedon's footprints are all over this first episode, or handprints, or however you want to call it, in terms of some of the characters. As someone who was a big fan of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, there are a lot of similar checked boxes here with some of the characters and the way they behave. And I mean, I liked Buffy. I loved Buffy for at least the first 6 seasons of it. And so I'm not really against that, but I also hope that as this season goes on, and now that we know that Whedon has stepped away from this project for reasons, I hope that they end up being able to stand on their own a bit more, that I'm not going to be watching each episode as it goes and be like, oh, that's a Drusilla redux, and oh, she's kind of acting like Faith or something. You know what I mean? So I hope that's not Buffy references, oh my gosh. I hope that's not what we're going to get all season long. But overall, it shows promise. I am intrigued about what the mystery is. And speaking of the mystery, let's get down into the breakdown of this episode. So the first things first, we get a really long cold opening of how the Touched came to be. Not exactly everything, right? Because as we see at the end of the episode, we see exactly what was falling from the sky, but we get a little bit of a glimpse of things falling from the sky and it touching certain people. And in all of this whole opening, we see some of the characters that we will see later on in the episode that play major parts. So I thought that was a pretty good opening. I thought it lasted a little bit longer than it needed to. Maybe because, once again, like I was saying, they crammed in every character that was affected, except maybe 1 or 2 of them. So, fine. Like, I kid you not. I think the first 5 to 10 minutes of this whole entire hour, no dialogue is spoken. It's just all action, and you pretty much having to pay attention to all the details, which is kind of cool, right? Because in the day and age where most people are watching things while they're looking at their phone or they're watching things on their phone and distracted and whatnot, it's nice where it's like, okay, this show is forcing you to pay attention. A big part of this episode was getting to know a little bit of Amelia True, Miss True, and also Penance, Penance Adair, which is her name, her friend, her close friend, and their powers. We see that Amelia has ripplings, as it's explained, where she can see things that's going to happen in the near future, it would seem. And she kind of gets transported to them for a second. It kind of knocks her off kilter. And then with Penance, we're explained later that she can see energy and where it goes, which makes her a really cool inventor when it comes to technology, which I think so far is probably my favorite superpower thus far of the Touched. It's probably Penance's superpowers. The main beginning of this basically goes to where they go to pick up a young girl named Myrtle, who is part of a working poor family. She seems to have what her mother describes as a tongue that is touched by the devil, supposedly. But what we find out is that basically she was touched, and what has happened is that she has all of these languages going on in her head to the point where she can't speak her native tongue, which is English, but she can understand English. I'm not sure how, useful that kind of power is, but the Touched isn't necessarily going to always give people useful powers. The debate that goes on in this whole entire episode is whether or not the Touched is an affliction, whether it's a curse, or whether it's a gift. And I have a feeling that's going to be what we're going to be dealing with throughout. And I'm fine with that. And that's where the whole XMen vibe comes from for those who are not familiar with X-Men, because you don't have to be, and that's probably a good thing. So some of this stuff is new to you. With the X-Men series, and it's a comic book series, it's been movies, it's been TV shows, it's been cartoons. It deals with the fact that these people have a chromosome in them or whatnot that gives them additional powers. Some call them the next stage in human evolution, while others, regular humans, have taken a stance of basically wanting to destroy them because of being afraid of what they are. And then within the X-Men, there are people like Magneto who are extreme and like, we need to take it all. And then there's people like Professor X who is like, no, we need to make peace with the humans and just let them see our side of things. And so there's that dynamic going on in the X-Men, and I see that going on here. You already get the seeds of it. Now, I'm not saying X-Men has the corner market on that kind of plot line, but it's interesting that this seems to be what's going on here, just set in Victorian London. So basically when True, I'm going to call her True. I like the name Amelia, but I like kind of calling her True. When True and Penance are explaining to the parents what's going on, which was a kind of funny scene. Like the mother was very deeply religious and being like, she was supposed to be able to work in the factories and now she can't because she sounds all weird about her daughter. And the father's a little bit more sympathetic. And it was nice that it didn't have some, parents who were on some really extreme stuff. Although they did have Myrtle chained up in her room, which was not cool. But then basically we see that Myrtle they're trying to kidnap Myrtle. So this is where we get our action of the episode, right? It's been kind of, introductory, and now we get action because True goes in, she cracks her neck, it gets intense. She knows how to fight somehow, I don't know, but she knows hand-to-hand combat. I'm guessing she picked that up in the last 3 years, who knows? And so they have a whole thing with these kidnappers, which was cool. I thought the thing with the kidnappers was cool. They had these masks on and they were trying to kidnap. Later on, we learned in this episode that the kidnappers, my guess is, the kidnappers are being, their leader is this weird mad scientist guy who seems to want to do experiments on the Touched. And what we find out through True and Penance later when they go back to the orphanage that they help run is that there have been women and others who are touched who have ended up missing, and they haven't just been running away from home like they previously thought. So there's kind of that mystery going on there. So then we go to the clergy, a board of men, well-to-do men who seem to get together and talk about the governing and things like that of London, of the town. And this is where we meet Lord Mason, who is my guess is going to be sort of our villain of the series, or at least the initial villain of the series. And he kind of makes this speech where he's like, you know, because they're all these older, well-to-do men are debating about what the touch are. Afflicted? Are they gifted? Are they a menace? And Mason seems to have an idea that they are the first wave of some type of threat to humanity. And he is basically saying, which was a great quote that I really enjoyed in the first episode, where he says they came at us through our women. I don't agree with that, of course, because this meeting was all about the racism, sexism, and classism, because it was ripe. But it was actually, you know, quite accurate, right? There was a lot of classism back in that time. There's a lot of classism now. So that worked. And it's kind of this idea, and they start to agree with him, the board, where it's like, this is a problem. It's not a good thing about the touched. It's a bad thing. And so, you know, kind of playing into what we figure people would go to, because a lot of people fear change, and that seems to be the basis of what's going on here. So we kind of get the sense that Mason is going to be kind of the villain when it comes to things. And then we find out later why he is that way. And we find out later that it has to do with the fact that, I think it was his granddaughter, that his granddaughter basically was also touched, but she fell out. Now, I don't know if the granddaughter died, but it seems like it really did affect her. I'm not exactly sure they needed to show us that, though, right? It was just kind of like, man, this is a lot. I mean, let's just get used to him as a villain first, and then maybe you could reveal that like episode 2 or 3 about his granddaughter. That would have been a cool reveal for like later, instead of all of it right then and there. But we did get from this scene with the board members that it seems to be mainly women, immigrants, people of color, and basically those of lower class status, working poor, working class people who seemingly are affected by this thus far. But then we are shown later that that's not really the case. Then we are introduced to Detective Frank Mundy is investigating what seemingly is a murder that the person who's telling him about it, the mine workers, are trying to blame on Malady. But, you know, the Detective Frank, basically realizes that's not the case. That even though she's crazy and she might be killing people, she didn't kill this particular person. So that kind of lets us know that there's another killer around. We just don't know who. But, you know, this was our intro to this detective, who I'm guessing is going to play a part, and he's kind of no nonsense. He seems to be sort of middle of the road thus far. We're also introduced to the beggar, Oren, who is the king of the streets, and Amelia, True, and Penance are working not with him, but they're getting info from him, and they're worried that he's also sending info to other people because they seemingly got attacked, like someone knew where they were going to be, so they don't know what's going on. So we got an intro to him. Not sure we needed the intro today, but it was a great, fun scene. Kind of showed how, you know, serious and semi-badass that True is, but also a little bit into the Beggar King. We are then introduced to Augie and Hugo. Augustus. He's awkward, and the two of them seem to be friends. Hugo seems to be a little bit of a hoe. Yes, he's a hoe, maybe. But also free-flowing and free-spirited kind of guy. He seems to run sex orgy type things, and him and Augie seem to be friends. And this is how we're also, through Augie, also introduced to his sister, who is the one who owns the orphanage that True and Penance help run. So there's all of that going on. The scene was okay. We got to see kind of, you know, that how awkward Augie is. We got to get a sense of how ridiculous Hugo is. Hugo kind of felt like a stereotype of every kind of womanizer kind of guy. I thought Augie had a little bit of a mystery to him. And we find out later that Augie is also one of the touched. He just doesn't realize it. And we don't know exactly what his power is exactly, although he really has a fondness for animals and birds. We also see that Hugo has some weird kind of drug that he gives to Augie, and a little box of this drug. I don't know if that's like the Victorian London version of ecstasy or what is going on there, but it's something. So another mystery. And then the opera happens, and a lot of major things happen at the opera, but it almost gets a little muddled because so much other stuff already happened before we got to the opera. But that's where we meet Malady. And Malady is awesome. You know, I got Drusilla from Buffy the Vampire vibes. Joss Whedon loves his crazy girl trope. And she gave this great speech after she kills one of the opera singers, and they start, her and her two henchmen, basically henchwoman and henchman, basically start, you know, killing the crowd of well-to-do. But then we have Mary Brighton, who starts to sing, and she's one of the touched, and her singing, very eerie, kind of like a siren song, kind of calms the people who are touched. And that's how we find out that Augie is touched, and only Penance seems to see it, that Augie is touched. And we see a few other people, no-name people in the crowd that are touched too. So basically, Malady decides to kidnap Mary, and I don't know if that's why she exactly came there in the first place, or whether she was just crazy and wanted to like say a speech, or maybe she was drawn there and didn't realize. It's not totally clear why Malady is there necessarily. I guess maybe she was drawn there, and then the reason was revealed that Mary was there. They kind of explained it in the after credits that HBO Max gives about the episode, but I feel like that's a shortcoming because I don't feel like it should need to be explained in the after credits. It should have been clear in the episode itself, but I digress. So basically, True goes after them, right? And Malady kicks her butt. Malady is wild and crazy, and she kicks True's butt. And that was pretty cool. I enjoyed that. And Mary basically gets kidnapped by these people. And then Penance and True basically decide that Mary is the key, because when Mary sings, you can get to see who a touched person is. It reveals the touched. And also in the midst of all of this, the aftermath of the opera scene, we also get the fact that we find out that Hugo and Detective Frank Monday are in cahoots in a way. It's a begrudging cahoots from the detective side of things, but it seems like Hugo might be doing some sort of trafficking of touched individuals or something that he's doing with them. So that's also hinted at. Whew. So there is a lot going on here. Am I right? Like, all of this was in the first episode, and I kind of, I don't know, I'm on the fence about that because, you know, I get it. It's not a 22 episode season. And you don't have 22 episodes. You're probably going to have like maybe 8 episodes. You know, that's how it is nowadays with shows on streaming services. It's either 6 to 10 episodes. So you kind of have to put a good amount in the first, and not in the first episode. You kind of have to put a good amount in each hour, which is great for viewers, right? Where we don't have filler episodes, things actually happen, things move. So that's great. I just worry that in their urgency to give everything like a huge punch in the first episode to get everyone tuned in, that they may have given us too much too soon. I would have liked to have marinated a bit more on the fact that True, initially that day that the touched came down, that she committed suicide, right? She had jumped in the river. I guess she lost her husband because they called her a widow, and she jumped in the river, and that was and you know, she was brought back because she ended up getting touched. Like, it would have been cool just to kind of marinate on the fact that our main heroine is this kind of broken individual a little bit. And, you know, I didn't even get to marinate on the fact that we got, in the midst of all this, Dr. Horatio, who is the black doctor who is working with them, which was very cool. Diversity, yay. And there's other sprinkles of diversity in there. London was a major city and port, so it makes sense that yay for diversity. And he's there, and he has a cool power too, where he can do surgery without actually touching the person, right? Which is very cool. And he helps out True and Penance, and he's at the orphanage. But there's a mystery with him, because when we first saw him in the beginning, he seemingly had a wife and a child, and now he seems to be by himself. And there also seems to be some weird kind of chemistry, maybe underlying romance with him and True. So I'm like, well, what happened to this dude's wife in the last 3 years? So there were certain things that were touched on and left kind of, they're not going to explain it. And then there was things that were over-explained a bit in the first episode, where I was like, it would have been cool if you could have waited to the next episode. I would have been fine with finding out about Hugo and the detective, like episode 2. That would have been fine. I didn't need to know right here, right now, what was going on. And so the vibe of this show is very soap opera-y in a little bit of a way. It's soap opera-y, it's supernatural, it's X-Men, it's Bridgerton. There's a lot going on here. That's pretty much what I've gotten so far. True is okay. She's kind of your standard, broken main girl. I'm so tough, but I got something going on under the surface. I'm a little bit broken. You don't know why yet. So I'm hoping that that's not all she has going for her, particularly because she's the main character. And so because this show has so much in it in terms of feeling like a little bit of other series you've already seen, I think the key here that they're going to have to do is make the characters more interesting, right? To make the characters like, okay, maybe you've seen this kind of overall story before, but you haven't seen it with these kind of characters. So I think that could be their strong suit, but we'll see where it goes as the season goes on. And I'm also interested to see if that thing from the sky is alien, because it'll be really interesting if they go with the alien perspective for this. I'll be like, all right, I don't know. Are we going to go in space in next season? I don't know. Comment down below and let me know your thoughts. Are you feeling this show so far? Did you watch the pilot episode? Do you have any favorite characters thus far? Any characters you want to know more about? Any characters you're like, they could not have them going further in this season and I'd be happy? Let me know, comment down below, and also be sure to subscribe so that you are the first to know when I post my videos. Thanks for watching and slicing into this storytelling with me.